Hi, mining community. Welcome back to another episode of the Dig Deep, the Mining Podcast. And today's guest is Ali Haji, who's the CEO of Ion Energy, who are an emerging leader in the exploration and development of Mongolia's lithium salars. They are well poised to play a strong role as the world embarks upon the third wave of clean energy revolution. The company has one of the largest exploration and first lithium brine licenses ever granted in Mongolia. Ali has a computer science degree and international experience in asset management, risk analysis, and program governance. And is here today to tell us a little bit more about the exciting project Ion Energy has that they're working on in Mongolia. So let's welcome Ali to the podcast. How you doing, Ali?
Doing well, Rob. Thank you very much for being so accommodating and allowing me to do this from my vehicle. So much appreciated.
Yeah, no, as I mentioned before we came online, I haven't interviewed anyone in their car and the background is different. And to me, it looks absolutely fine as long as you're comfortable sitting in the car doing this. So if you're able to sort of give us an overview of your career, your background, for those that listen that may not have heard of you before or don't know much about your background, appreciate you can give us an overview of your career to where you got to today.
Of course, yeah. So you mentioned briefly that I have a computer science degree. Absolutely correct. I went to the University of Western Ontario in London, Ontario. Received a degree in computer science and joined Invesco, which is a global asset manager, as an IT asset management analyst. I sort of moved through various positions in the organization to move on to the program management office, working on mergers and acquisitions. I was placed in Hong Kong to acquire AIG's real estate business, moved back to Toronto and worked on Morgan Stanley Van Kampen's acquisition by Invesco, then worked on a number of different strategic initiatives for the organization before being placed in London, England, co-leading a center of excellence for investment operations. I moved back to Canada about 4 years ago and joined Atma Capital Markets as an advisor to Step Gold, gold producer in Mongolia. And my mining experience comes from my father. So he's been in mining since 1998 in Zambia. So you could say it runs in the blood. Around 2016, when I returned to Canada, I was in Mongolia advising Step Gold, as I mentioned, when I co-founded Ion Energy in August 2017. So that's a bit about my background, Rob.
Yes, certainly. You mentioned your father's in mining. Does he work in a particular discipline, or is he in sort of senior management?
He's C-suite. So copper concentrate out of Zambia in the copper belt there. He's been exporting that to China since the mid 90s. So C-suite, owner of a mine, 2 mines actually, and just shipping concentrate.
Yeah. And do you sort of lean on him for any advice at all, or any challenges that you may be facing?
I do, but copper and lithium are 2 different beasts, and so he sort of lets me run independently. And I've built a very strong team of advisors that have experience in the lithium space, and so they guide me a fair bit as well.
Yeah, no worries. So just wondering if you can give us an overview of Ion Energy. Tell us obviously how the company started and progressed to where you are today.
Of course. So August 2017, I was in Mongolia advising Step on the acquisition from Centerra Gold of their ATO project. My chairman, Matthew Wood, and I sort of, sat in a boardroom and thought to ourselves, well, Mongolia is a vast country, 1.5 million square kilometers, 3.5 million people. Only 3% of it has been explored. It was also sort of the tail end of the last lithium cycle when companies such as Nemaska and others had gone public. We thought, lithium was going to make a comeback as a result of electric vehicle demand. And Mongolia being Ulaanbaatar, for instance, I'll send you a photo after this, Rob, but more Priuses per capita than anywhere else in the world. So we thought to ourselves, lithium's coming back. Let's look for lithium in country. There's bound to be lithium in country. And so we started to dig through the archives at the Ministry of Mines. And we found that in the 1950s, the Russian government, when Mongolia was a satellite nation of the USSR, did some drilling around the border with China in Sukhothai province. They managed to pull up a brine aquifer. They were likely looking for potable water, chalked it down to, you can't drink this stuff, let's move on. 1990s, the Russians and Mongolians revisited that exact same site. They pulled up this brine aquifer. They tested for a plethora of minerals, including lithium. But it wasn't until 2016 that a gentleman by the name of Dr. Hashbat Dasht who's now on my advisory board, did some drilling and was able to extract and sample lithium brine. So he did some drilling in 2016. He found an average grade of 426 ppm, a maximum grade of 811 ppm in 2 holes drilled 70 kilometers apart. So that prompted us to visit the Ministry of Mines and ask them to put this license up for tender. They put it up for tender in 2018, and we were awarded the license in January of 2019. And that's Babhai Ul, our flagship license. So 81,000 hectares, a massive land package, the largest, in fact, ever granted to a public or private company or entity by the government of Mongolia. It is in Sukpatar province, located only 24 kilometers from the Chinese border. So since being awarded that license in January of 2019, at a time when cannabis was very much the flavor of the month, it was difficult for us to go public, but we did start to see that electrification was growing in demand. Vehicles were being purchased around the world that were electric. A lot of new manufacturers started to come online. So we waited till about August 2020, at in the middle of the pandemic, if you will, to listen to what governments were doing as COVID recovery funds. And we found that the European Union, with their 750 billion euro package, allocated just over 20 billion euro to electrification and gigafactory subsidization. The UK did the £1 billion. The Biden administration is earmarking $400 billion over the next 4 years for the same purpose. So that prompted us to go public before this lithium or EV boom that we saw in the first quarter of 2021. We went public on Babhai being our flagship license, on the the Venture Exchange in Toronto. We raised just over $2.7 million that would keep us funded to explore our license. It's shortly after going public, we added to our advisory team. So we added, the likes of Paul Fornazzari, which we can talk about in a bit more detail later. But we went public. We started exploration shortly after going public, and since then we've done a fair bit of work. So, I'll pause there and let you sort of drive the conversation. But I think that there's a lot of exciting things to talk about.
Yeah, certainly. Well, I wondered if you can obviously tell us some of the work that you're currently doing and what you're planning to do, probably to the end of the year. One of my last questions I always ask, what is the sort of short, medium term outlook? But yeah, if you can sort of tell us what you have just been doing more recently, and I suppose to the end of the year, if you can give us that overview.
Of course. So, on the back of receiving Babhai and starting exploration in October, we did a geophysics and CSAMT program that allowed us to determine sort of where the aquifers exist within the stratigraphy. So that basically allowed us to design our exploration program. Some of the guys that I've added to the team, half my board is Mongolian. I think that's important to note. Being a Mongolian company, we think it's important that you operate that way, irrespective of jurisdiction. But some of the guys on my board include Paul Fornazzari, who was the original chairman of Lithium Americas, was a director at Lithium, helped both those companies raise significant amounts of cash, and is a partner at Fasken, where he leads the LATAM Global Mining Group. So, very much considered a pioneer in the lithium brine space for the Americas. Beyond him, we added a gentleman by the name of Don Haynes. Don is a hydrogeologist. He's a lithium exploration geologist. He's done work for lithium all over the world. And he really designs, oversees, and ensures the execution of our exploration program. So it is quite a focused sort of approach to understanding where the lithium is. And then Dr. Hashbat Dasht, who I mentioned earlier, he's on my advisory team as well. He's our local scientist. He ensures that everything is completed to Dawn's specifications. And then very recently, I added Dr. David Deeks. He was the Senior Vice President and Chief Technology Officer at Lithium Americas. Prior to that, he was at Tesla, where he worked with senior leadership to put together Gigafactory 1. So a lot of really good experience driving our exploration program that kicked off in October last year. We were then forced to lock down in Mongolia in November. November was the first time Mongolia ever went into a lockdown since the pandemic. So that, they managed it quite well until a foreign visitor brought in the virus and ultimately ended up shutting down the country. But we didn't we brushed that off as an opportunity really to think and strategize and understand how we can better utilize our funds on the ground to ensure that we're doing a good exploration program right off the bat. Obviously, being a junior miner, we don't have very deep pockets, so we need to be quite calculated with our exploration program. So on the back of that lockdown in November, the teams are allowed to sort of get back out to site in and around May. But during that hiatus, we spent a fair bit of time ensuring that we're designing a program that allows us to best spend our funds. But we also acquired a new license, so the Urgaknarin license, 29,000 hectares in Dornot province, in Dorngovi province, I beg your pardon, a province that is very infrastructure rich, the geology of which very much mirrors what we have at Bavayol. And we also raised $5 million from a PI led bought deal that was co-led by Stifel GMP. So that $5 million along with our IPO funds keep us fully funded for the next 2 years. We also have, in addition to that, access to $11.5 million in warrants. So we have no finance overhang as a company. We are fully funded. And when we were able to get back to site in May, we started to drill using a diamond core rig. We managed to pull up core samples. We also managed to extract brine samples. We drilled over 20 holes and well over 800 meters in total drilling. The press release, I believe, was put out yesterday. So for all our listeners, if you're keen, July 15th was when the press release was released. So that exploration program allowed us to extract enough brine to have it sampled by SGS laboratories in Mongolia. They are ISO certified. They will be doing a lot of our work as far as the assaying is concerned. We expect to start to see results in the next, sort of 3 to 6 weeks because of the backlogs from COVID. But really keen that we were able to get this first phase, this sort of maiden exploration program off the ground, completed with no hitches. And now we await results while we develop phase 2 of our exploration program on Bavayol. But we will commence exploration on Urgaknarin, our secondary license, in the coming weeks as well.
Yeah, no, it sounds exciting with what you've done so far, especially with your strong management team as well. How important was it to build that strong backbone of obviously advisors and your executive team? How important, and how did you go about bringing those people on board?
I think it's extremely important to have a strong management team with proven track record of success around the world. With my team, myself, I've had international asset management experience, and I've generally been, an individual that's assigned to things to fix them, or to roll up my sleeves and actually get things done. And the team that I assembled is very much a similar team to what the team is at Step Gold. Step Gold being a sister yet independent company in Mongolia. And they've had as a team, we've had over 100 years of exploration and mining successes around the world. So we believe the team is extremely important, but I couldn't be more proud of my advisory team. I think, we've hit I don't want to call it the jackpot, but I think we've checked every box as a result of having an individual like Paul, who's extremely strategic in nature, who is a partner at a major mining law firm around the world. Don being a very technical individual, and then Dr. Hashbat being a local scientist, and David Deeks obviously being a Tesla alumni. Speaks says a lot about him as an individual that's managed to put together Gigafactory 1. So with that team, we've been able to not only identify Urgaknarin for acquisition, but also ensure that we're exploring the right way the first time around. As I said, junior mining, your pockets are not very deep, so it's important that you don't botch things up on your first go around. So we're happy with that team, and I think as a company, you touched on what can folks expect for the next 6 to 12 months. We will continue to explore. Bavayol conduct all our necessary exploration programs. We will also commence exploration on Urgaknarin. We intend to have an early resource indication in and around this fall. That early resource indication would be derived by understanding the average grade of the brine in the ground, and using the CSAMT and microseismic work that we've done before to get a volume. So when you have an average grade and a volume, it's not 43101 compliant, nor is it JORC compliant, but you're able to get an early resource indication. And that, in our minds, will get the strategics quite interested in having a conversation with us. So towards the end of this year, we would expect that a strategic would come in for a toehold in the organization, whereby they would potentially take on 10% of the equity. We would likely give them a board seat, and that's where we would add the necessary sort of development and production expertise to our advisory team. That would also give that strategic a ROFR, so a right of first refusal, with respect to acquiring the assets from us in the future, or ultimately taking on a stronger position to bring it to development in the coming years as well. So the intention for ION is not to take these brine salars to production. That's never been our goal. Our goal has always been to understand the assets, to de-risk the assets, get a foothold, and get a good grasp of the Mongolian lithium assets, and ultimately bring in a strategic that would either acquire the company in its entirety or take on a major position in order to bring it to production in the future.
Yeah. We don't hear a lot about Mongolia and obviously the general capital markets or really the mining world. So why Mongolia? What made you sort of focus on that country?
Valid question. My chairman, Matthew Wood, he's a gold geologist. He's an individual that's a rare breed in the sense that he marries the technical side of the house along with the banking side of the house. So he understands capital markets, but he's also a fantastic geologist. So in 2009, when he was living in Hong Kong, he met his wife, Zaya, who is Mongolian. He ended up moving to Mongolia to look for gold. Being a Rio Tinto gold scholar, he thought he'd look for gold in Mongolia. Ended up being in Mongolia during the last coal boom. So ultimately went back to Australia, to Sydney, raised $20 million in a vehicle without any assets. Went back to Mongolia, acquired a number of coal-bearing assets, explored them, de-risked them, put together an early resource indication that was impossible for a major to ignore. So Banpu of Thailand came in and acquired Hunu coal from Matt for $500 million in an all-cash sale, 18 months from his go public transaction. So really big win for Matt, for his shareholders, for Mongolia as a country at a time when they were putting a lot of negative press on the back of Oyu Tolgoi and Rio Tinto. So a big win for them there, but Matt did things right. He had, half his board was Mongolian, very similar to what we did with ION. When he exited Hunu to Banpu, he had 300 staff, of which only 2 were expats. So when you're employing locals, you're paying taxes, you're viewed very much as a Mongolian company, you can buy a lot of goodwill in country as a result. And so his experience with Hunu allowed us to then acquire Step Gold from Centerra. Centerra had a project in Dornod province by the name of Altan Saganovo. We acquired that as a group from them using a streaming agreement from Triple Flag Mining Finance, who's led by Sean Uzmar, the ex-CFO of Barrick Gold. It's majority owned by Paul Singer of the Elliott Group in New York. They gave us $23 million in 2016 to acquire this asset from Centerra. And then we were able to take it public in May of 2018, in and around the time that I was very focused on ION, and that became sort of my go-to. Anil, Matt, and Bata, Enki, the individuals on my board, were able to take that public in May 2018, and they were able to bring it to production in 22 months. So, to build up an operation in Mongolia within 22 months and pour first gold is quite an impressive feat. And once again, done at the height of the pandemic with a 100% Mongolian team. So Mongolia has the necessary skill set, the necessary labor, the necessary government support, as well as a proven track record of mining and exploration. 20% of the GDP is driven by mining. So it's a very strong jurisdiction for mining. And given the fact that only 3% of it has been explored, we as a team are very focused on Mongolia and very long Mongolia as a friendly and fantastic mining jurisdiction.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. Obviously, Mongolia is relatively close to China, well, next door sort of thing. With the obviously electric vehicle boom and obviously a lot of governments around the world looking to go more greener. What have you done to sort of highlight Ion Energy's proposition in the Asian market?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think what we've seen in the last year has really changed the outlook for battery metals. Simon Moore of Benchmark Minerals, if you're familiar with him, he's testified in front of the U.S. Senate committee on a number of occasions, until which time they made battery metals metals of strategic importance or national importance. So in the last few years, I think we've seen a vast amount of spending by governments around the world to increase the adoption rates for electric vehicles. Everybody knows Tesla. That's a brand that's synonymous with electric vehicles, but it's important to note that in China, for instance, there's a company known as NIO, N-I-O, and China today buys 3 times as many EVs per capita than the rest of the world. Tesla is putting in gigafactories in China, which is fantastic for Tesla, but if you look at the EV trends over the last 2 to 3 quarters, Tesla's market share is reducing. So Volkswagen Group outsold the Tesla Group in the last 2 quarters. This is not something you hear about often, but Elon Musk, being the personality that he is, you tend to always think of EVs as being Tesla. So to talk to your question, to answer your question as to the geographical importance of where we're located. A lot of lithium today comes from Latin America, so Bolivia, Chile, and Argentina, and that's the brines that are in production around the world. You have hard rock in Australia, but governments around the world, on the back of sort of the geopolitical risks that we're seeing today, have decided to find a localized supply chain, or continental supply chain, as we call it, for the various battery metals that are required. In the US, you have Thacker Pass, you have some brines in Arkansas and Carolinas that are coming online to help serve that market there. In Europe, the European Battery Metals Alliance has now started to look at hard rock in Portugal and Serbia to service the Northvolt factories in Finland and Norway that ultimately feed into the Volkswagen and German auto manufacturing behemoths. China today imports the vast majority of its lithium from either Australia or Latin America. There is no continental supply of lithium in Asia. There are some brines in Qinghai in China that are very high in impurities, and that generally ends up in toys that you buy on Amazon, or walkie-talkies for the kids, that kind of thing. They're not going to end up in vehicles because they're very impure. So the world is now shifting to a continental supply chain. And given our proximity to China is, we're only 24 kilometers from the border, and we have some of the largest land packages in Mongolia that are lithium bearing. It's inevitable in our view that either the Chinese, the Taiwanese, the Koreans, the Japanese, all major battery manufacturers would be looking to find that continental supply chain. So as Ion starts to come online to produce, it is of our view that we would be essentially creating that continental supply chain in Asia and providing these major battery producers and manufacturers with the necessary lithium to drive the electrification and the mobility of the future.
Okay, yeah, no, that sounds great. I understand the global green revolution is a passion of yours. I wonder if you can just tell us more about that.
Yeah, I think it's one that we see as inevitable, one that we think is necessary to ensure that we're protecting the future for the future generations. Electrification has come leaps and bounds from where it was 12, 15 years ago when the first sort of EVs rolled onto the market, and the range of which has improved significantly. So using an LFP battery, you can now drive 1 million miles before you have to replace your battery. And we think ultimately being part of this clean green energy revolution, specifically in a country that's been powered by fossil fuels for since the Industrial Revolution, essentially, is a great way to help bring Mongolia to a cleaner, greener future, as well as the rest of the world. So we're very passionate about the green revolution. Obviously, one of the largest wind farms in Asia is being built not too far from Babayot. So the expectation for when Ion goes to production, we would hope, is that we leverage as much renewable resources as possible to bring things over the line.
Okay. What sets Ion Energy apart from sort of other companies in that space? And why should our listeners be paying attention to Ion Energy over the coming months?
I think Ion is uniquely positioned in that it is the first mover in lithium brine in Mongolia. It's a country that us as a management team have had a significant amount of experience and success in. We're also located very close to the largest markets in the world. And last but not least, our value proposition is that we are fully funded. We're fully financed for the next 2 years and do not require any equity raises. We will continue to de-risk and continue to trade at a significant discount to our peers. So I'd encourage listeners to visit our website, take a look at our corporate presentation, where we highlight a number of our different comparisons and peers. There's some research reports available to listeners as well that show you that we still have a long way to go to catch up to our valuation so that we are in line with our peers.
Yeah. And lastly, just wondered if you can just conclude. Obviously, give us an overview of Ion Energy over the coming years, maybe the short, medium, and sort of long term. I know you covered a little bit about the short term, but just wondered if you can just highlight past into next year and over the coming years.
Of course. So Ion's proposal today is that we're going to continue to explore our assets that we currently hold. So Baba Ayol and Urgak Naran. We will put out early resource indications on Baba Ayol later this year. We expect to bring in a strategic investor in and around the end of this year for a toehold in the organization of about 10%. That capital injection at a higher valuation would allow us to not only acquire additional licenses in country over the next 2 years, but also ensure that we are exploring them and getting closer to understanding development. The intent for Ion and its management team is to provide an exit to our shareholders in 18 to 24 months, whereby we would either sell the vast majority of the company or the company as a whole to a strategic to bring it to production in the Asian market.
Okay. Ali, really appreciate your time and give us an overview of Ion Energy. I can see it's got a great future ahead of you. You've got a strong management team, strong advisors as well. The jurisdiction sounds encouraging. Seems everyone's on your side, and look forward to sort of seeing the journey and development of Ion Energy. If our audience wants to sort of reach out to you, wants to find out a little bit more about the company, how can they go about doing that? Are you across any social media platforms?
Yeah, absolutely. We're on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. I'm one of those rare breeds that answers my phone at any time of the day. So my phone is also listed on the website along with my contact details. Feel free to get in touch directly with me if anybody has any questions.
Yeah, certainly. We'll include all those in the show notes with this podcast as well. So yeah, hopefully our audience will reach out to you if they've got any questions. Really appreciate your time again. For those that are listening, appreciate if you can share this podcast episode to friends, family, anyone around the world in the mining industry, especially those that are in lithium or even in the electric vehicle market or even in the electrification market, because it's certainly a company that you guys should sort of follow closely. There's got a lot of development ahead of them, but I'm sure they're going to succeed with their strong management team. Those that are watching on the YouTube channel, appreciate again if you can share and like below. If you've got any comments, obviously you can comment below, or obviously send Ali any emails or get in contact with me if you've got any questions. So like I said again, really appreciate your time, Ali. Until next time, happy mining.